Aloha, my name is Ian Akahi Masterson, aka the Surf Professor, and I live here in this beautiful place called Hakipu'u. I've been here 20 years. I was born in Malaysia and grew up in Kailua and Ko'olaupoko area, Waimanalo, and then moved here in 2004 with my beautiful family, raised them over here, and yeah, stoked to be hanging out with you, Ramon. My mom and my mom's family is Portuguese immigrants from the first boat of Portuguese come from Madeira Island, 1879. And so she was working TWA. My dad was international business, so we were overseas at the time. But eventually, she always wanted to bring her family, my brothers and sister, back to Hawaii to raise us in a Hawaiian way. And I'm forever grateful for that, you know. We landed, found a place in Kailua and off the Duck Road over there, and grew up surfing shore break. And, you know, back then it was like straight up surf and Kauai and Shannon Hill, Radabulaia and them, and all the inspirations from Kailua. And yeah, so integrated into surfing early on and got my license, drove a Volkswagen van all over the island to surf with my buddies. Went to Punahou, graduated in 1989, and went off to college at Windward Community College. After going to USC for a year, you know, my mom had gotten breast cancer, and so I came back to support her and play in the reggae band that me and my brother Bryce had formed back in the late 80s with his friends from various schools. And so came back, played music. Really fortunate through an anthropology class to have learned about anthropology and met, went on a field school. So I was doing archaeology and going part-time to Windward over all the years. And so, you know, but just wild Kailua boy surfing, loved it all. And through that, you know, I was at Windward. My Hawaiian language teacher, Kumukalani Mainaki, would always inspire me to speak in Hawaiian. Brought an article that Plymouth University in England was offering a surf science and technology degree. It's 1999, so it was like fast forward way. But that changed my life because, you know, I said I was ready to Hele, England, go do the program. And he said, well, here we are in the Cradle of Surfing, you know, why don't you propose a class here? And I was inspired by that, started to think, what is it that is, you know, because academia had traditionally never given surfing the credence, the credentials or the respect. You know, Hollywood doesn't either. We grew up with Spicoli, if you're familiar with him. So you can imagine that I started to ask myself, what is it? And it turns out, you know, it takes a very intelligent and very aware and sharp person to be a surfer. Physically fit, mentally focused, and, you know, the spiritual connection with the ocean. And through that, I went and reached out to one of my mentors, was my mom's teacher, and his wife was my brother's teacher and my teacher, and Fred Van Dyke and Jo Marie Florence, and they really inspired me. They told me, hey, here you are asking us about surfing and all the intellectual and physical and spiritual aspects of surfing. You just keep going, boy. One day people will come to you as a resource. So that's really what sent me on an elevated journey. Here we are in the center for the commercial surfing world. The 7 Mile Miracle is just one of the aspects, one of the places where waves break on Oahu. We're surrounded by waves, good waves. Shh. There's none here on the east side, so, you know, head down south. But we're really fortunate because it's not only the waves, but the surfers. And so I've had the privilege and the opportunity to meet all these amazing surfers, both men and women, who grew up inspired and lived their life through surfing, and that inspired me. And so through that, I really developed a different kind of relationship with surfing. And I was into old single fins and riding old boards, because back then there was garage sales. There was no eBay and all these kind of things that make surfboards expensive. There are no surfboard auctions. And as the surfboards transitioned into lighter, thinner boards that surfed over their tails with the 3 fins and everything, I kind of found my alignment with the old boards. And so through that, got to meet Ben Aipa surfing Liliuokalani. Eventually got myself out to Waimea and met true legends like James Jones and Clark Abbey and Darrick Doerner and all these guys, who, Ken Bradshaw, you know, who inspired me to go bigger and to deepen that connection. And so, you know, what got me into surfing, it was every day, every moment. We lived in the mountains and on the sea, and boards only cost $10 at the garage sales. So I sucked up all these boards. A lot of people said single fins don't work anymore. You know, it's the thrusters, but it's not the board, it's the rider. And it was really Ben Aipa who was like, hey, back then, you know, 10 guys surfing, one guy could really surf the board, surf the wave. Other guys just riding the boards. You know, you one of those guys. Today, 10 people out, 10 people can surf. They can surf good, because why? The technology is there, the boards work. But so there's a lot of pride in that relationship, those relationships that formed. And through my kumu inspiring me to propose a course at Windward Community College in surf science, culture, and technology, that grew because there's so much to share, there's so much to tell. It grew into a bunch of courses, Polynesian surf culture and the surf science aspects. And I was able to share with generations of students over 25 years later. And I'm stoked for that. I've seen a lot of people grow their relationship with the ocean. And people who care about the ocean, that's us. We're gonna save the ocean. You know, Darrick is, Double D is one of the most humble guys I know. And I don't know why he's taking me under his wing, but I'm grateful for that, you know? And it's interesting because surfing made way, opened the door for lifeguarding, but it was that, well, there's so many people I can mention. But speaking of Darrick Doerner, you know, he really is one of the cornerstones of our surfing world today, and really deserves the credit for everything he's doing. You know, I mean, now he's doing the Hawaii Surfing Museum, and he's doing great with it. And the fact that he's got his boy Tiger Doerner involved is even more significant, because it is a legacy. It's generations, it's family. And so, yeah, I'm just really fortunate to know him, and I love him very much. And I've seen him surf Waimea Bay, paddle in, you know, and maybe, so you're a guy, huh, Ian, huh? But that's how it starts, right? And in the lineup, you better show humility when you show up. And over time, they watch you and they see. And eventually, you know, at first they're like, who's this kid? I want Maina Tret. As Melpu said to me long ago. I love that guy, by the way, you know. But over time, they're all right. Those retro is, because me and a bunch of my friends surf single fins. Ben Aipa, hey, retro, how you doing, you know? But it's those generations. My mom graduated 65 Punahou with Paul Strow, Fred Hemmings, and a bunch of other surfers. And So she was the one who originally, I think it was 1982, 83, she took me to the Buffalo Longboard contest, introduced me to Randy Rarick, said go out during the Legends, you know, kind of free surf thing with them. Randy paddled me out there and we all surfed together. I didn't understand the significance of that. Buffalo Keaulana, the first lifeguard on the west side, and whose family legacy has led the way for safe ocean activities today. Extreme surf. Respect. And not only Brian, but Rusty and the rest of them, you know? What a time to grow up on Oahu. So I'm humbled by those people who've inspired me over the years, from the pioneers who I got to meet, like even Doc Wall, Woody Brown. And that was through the inquiry of surfing. Fred Hemmings, who just really supported me and supported my mom through her cancer battle, because that's what classmates do and that's what friends do. You know, so legacy, the genealogy of surfing. Keaulana itself, you know, look at that name right there. The high platform of the current, the wave. There's a reason why that family are the educators to all of us. They're the reason they're the protectors. I could say the same of Uncle Clyde Aikau and the Aikau family, going right back to Heva Heva. Kahuna Nui for Kamehameha, Kanalu line, surfing class of priests that held the knowledge, not only of surfing, but of all the professions of the kahus, going back to the time of Kamapua'a and the Lono priests. So it's all, that legacy of surfing is so important, you know? So here I was, this kind of flashy wetsuit American kid, because we're grown up to think that way. And somewhere, I don't know, it was probably early morning barrel looking out at the stars over Mount Ka'ala, you know, at Laniakea, and or a rainbow as the wave broke, and something clicked between all this academics and all this experience and then all these influences and the reality, the cultural reality that surfing is a traditional Hawaiian cultural activity. So, yeah, thanks, Darrick, for bringing that up. The boards, you know, that was when I first started this line in 1999. Okay, so 89 Punahou, I went to USC for a year, came back home and went to Windward Community College, graduated, and they had a great relationship with HPU with their Phi Theta Kappa scholarships. And so I jumped in there and met these anthropologists, Dr. Rob Borowski, Auntie Lynette Cruz, Dr. Auntie Lynette Cruz, who were phenomenal inspirations. And so I wanted to continue research on that from my kumu at Windward, who had inspired me to create this class. And so the first thing I did was I heard that a guy named Professor Ben Finney was giving a lecture. I think it was the Academy of Arts or somewhere. I went and got to shake his hand and meet him. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Ben Finney, but he was one of the first, well, he was one of the originators of the Polynesian Voyaging Society. He's one of the founders, helped to build Hokulea, went on the first journey and did the anthropology recording. Now, there's all kinds of stuffs about all of that, because some people are coming from science and some people are coming from culture, and it is the bloodline of reality. But we're fighting against something much bigger than that, and that's the perception and impression, and who gets to own the knowledge of Polynesian voyaging. And at that time, Andrew Sharp and was a professor over there, author of The Drift Theory. And I'm gonna get it wrong here. Was it 25,000 islands and 65 million miles of sea or something like that? No. Every single one of them was found by the Oceanians, the Austronesians. Yeah, we say Polynesia, Micronesia, Melanesia, one people, Oceania. That doesn't happen when you're drifting, you know? So they're on a really important mission. And look at Hokule Atere. The Hawaiian term for voyaging itself in the Kumulipo, in their creation chants, is He'enalu Ma Mao. For those of you in the yard, He'enalu, that's surfing. Ma Mao, far, far off, so far off, it's almost unreachable. That star way off in the south and west, yeah. The voyagers were surfing from afar. And that was what Ben Finney said, Polynesian voyaging. Surfing is a basic marine adaptation of the seafaring peoples of Oceania. As sure as they left the shore, they had to go through waves. As sure as they landed on shore, they had to go through waves. Yeah, just ask Moana. You know, it's for real. So it was a skill and ability that the leaders, that the people had to be able to seek out new islands. Astronomy teacher Joe Ciotti repeats what the ancestors told their people. Under every bright star lies an island. Go there, find it. There was no drifting, it was purposeful migration. Upwind, because you got go upwind so you can go home easy, grab everybody and come back once you find the place. And that connection of surfing with voyaging is critical to the understanding of the integration of surfing in the oceanic cultures, without a doubt. And Ben, you know, tells me, yeah, I said, is that okay if I continue your research on surfing? He wrote his book in the 50s as a thesis, a master's thesis. He was gonna do it on voyaging, but you know, he felt kind of threatened by these big timers who are telling him, you like graduating. So he turned, did his works on surfing, and then, you know, built Hokulea and went swimming to prove, or went voyaging with real Hawaiians to show that it could be done. And he said, yeah, you go. Because I was able to show through my research in English translations of Hawaiian lore and Hawaiian accounts and Hawaiian language newspapers that they were surfing diagonally across waves. Now, this is something that most people don't even understand, but back in the last century, the common thing was to say, you know, Hawaiians, they surf straight off, like in Waikiki. You see it in all the pictures in the 1880s, 90s, and by that time we had planked wood coming in that have impacted the shapes of the boards and the functionality of the boards. And we had work and worship and all these cultural changes and a ban on surfing and hula and language and everything else once, well, tomorrow's July 4th. Great day for America, not so good for Hawaii. That was the day that they marched on Iolani Palace. So there had been so many changes that surfing had gone back to a rudimentary form in these urban areas like Waikiki. People love to say surfing almost disappeared. And here's where it gets overturned and starts to get claimed because we like to claim everything and we're discoverers. And, you know, we took surfing to that next level, says the people who came here later. Those explorers, conquerors, colonizers. Sorry, I can say that because we came to work on the plantations and family says, hey, King Kalanianaole was friends with the King of Portugal, went to Madeira Island and the Azores and Porto Santo and said, look at these people living on a volcanic island in the same latitude as Hawaii, building rock walls for their vineyards, you know, with this cute little instrument called the machete. They look like they'd integrate well. Let's bring them back to Hawaii. Let's have them be the contract laborers on the plantations. And that's how my family came. Grandpa Augusto Diaz sold all of his ukuleles and everything because he was a troubadour. He worked as a tenyero, made barrels for the vineyards. He worked as a cabinet maker, and he built instruments. He brought that talent here, opened the first Diaz Guitars, the first guitar shop in Honolulu in 1882, and set up shop on King Street. And King Kalanianaole would come down and give him instructions on how to make his rahals and his spraginas and things like that. Real different position when I look at myself and the way that my family raised me. Didn't understand it. Like I said, flashy wetsuits, 80s, you know, the whole thing. It was Auntie Tina, the 11-year-old, who would translate the King's English into Portuguese for Grandpa. And that's how his instruments were made. I digress. But so there was this claiming of, oh, surfing almost disappeared, and we saved it. And yep, I'm a member of the outrigger. I'll say it, you know. And Alexander Hume Ford and those kind of guys were instrumental in the promotion of surfing around the world. But it was actually the Hawaiian princes, Kuhio and Prince Jonah, Kuhio, Kalanianaole, Hapi'ikoi, who took surfing to California, surfed there at the Lorenzo River mouth in Santa Cruz, and then following on those heels, and they were there for school. Following on that came Duke Paoa Kahanamoku. The rest is history. He went around the world for swimming. That was his ability. But it wasn't only Duke who could swim that way. It was his brothers were in the Olympics too. Duke was in 4 Olympics, would have been 5, World War I now. Over 20 years. And his brother was in the Olympics too. And there's stories about that are amazing because they held to their Hawaiian traditional beliefs. And they carried themselves. As the Maori said, when your ancestors see you, they see all, or when an elder sees you, he sees all your ancestors standing on your shoulders. So you know what that means, right? You better stand tall so they can support you. And I just, when that elder told me that down in Whakatane in Aotearoa, New Zealand, all I could think of was Duke Paoa Kahanamoku and the way he stood, the way he carried himself. He's our royal, he's our chief of surfing, who handed that, who gifted that to the world. Surfing, and again, here's Dr. Ben Finney telling me, don't get involved with who is the first surfers. We'll never know. In fact, 100th monkey. Everywhere that there was a native indigenous culture who lived on the ocean, interacted with the ocean, had to go fishing to get their food, to collect resources. Everywhere that occurred, there was surfing. And we know that now. You know, of course, South America and Peru, we see the Trujillos and we see them surfing over there. 10,000 years ago on their pottery. We know that in Ghana, the Ashanti tribes and the other tribes were surfing along the coast of Africa. Same thing. They had dugouts without amas, without outriggers. And they were phenomenal in the ocean. Who showed us that? Well, Mike Hinton and those guys who were in Endless Summer. You know, it was already familiar to them. He said, don't get involved with that argument. Everybody needs to wake up and realize we're all surfing. As a traditional resource collection, a skill and ability that was not just a daily practice in Hawaii, and I can say that in Peru too, but a ritual activity, that were ceremonies that were practiced. Because if you could go out in the ocean, man or woman, get food, and come back in, that raised your social status. You acquire mana through that. You better believe in your ancestors, because they're the one that's going to carry you to shore. You know, so in this way, Mama was far, far off, but it took a really skilled double-hulled knife, you know, hydrodynamically correct va'a, waka, canoe to ride the waves that were swell trains going, the individual waves are going 70 miles an hour across the sea. And that's why my kumu tongin Emil Wolfgram said, we went from a place there were giant mo'o crocodiles to Tonga in a matter of 8 days, 4,000 miles. And he said, fa'a se mama. And I went, whoa. And I was in Guam and I met a guy from Pukeal over there in the Marshall Islands. He goes, mama, sasao. That's the big wave that goes around the island and keeps going. Long period swell. One people. Surfing was integrated as that daily activity. All people surfed, all ages, all sexes, all genders, all classes. But there were times, especially in Hawaii and in other places like Tahiti, where surfing was for the ali'i, for the higher classes. You can imagine, I don't know if you can see this big, long Olo surfboard over here with the rounded bottom. Lean left, go right. Whoa. Changes when you have a fin on the back, because this is your pico. It's turning from the center of buoyancy. Just like a canoe, that's why you get the paddle to poke. I figured, I mean, if you're that good and skilled, you might be able to drag a foot and turn, but you know, I'm laying down, dragging my whole body. You know what I mean? But you go, woe is the commoner who gets in the way of the ali'i surfing across the wave. Whoo, pau kahana. You know? So again, it's ritual regulation. Oh, clear the water. The Pipe Masters is happening. I won't say it. Don't want any kooks out during that contest. Sorry, I said it. But same kind of thing, you know? I mean, it was proper. And that as a ritual athletic, that's what Tom Stone dubbed it in his thesis. Surfing was really important because, you know, you inherit mana, your supernatural power, you could say. You inherit everything your ancestors gave you. Doesn't matter your ethnicity. You inherit that. Yeah, the best and the worst, but you can call on the best. You can call that forth. But there's another thing too. You acquire mana through your feats, through your abilities, through competitions like that. Not necessarily always, you know, man against man or woman against man. Woman's gonna win, by the way. But also person against nature. You know? And it's not even against, it's your ability to flow with that, to glide atop the crest of a wave, you know, like the bird that soars atop the crest of the wave. And that's that basic metaphor. As a traditional Hawaiian cultural activity, surfing went even deeper because it was a poetic metaphor in the stories that, you know, the mo'olelo, the stories themselves are poetic visions. They're encoded with environmental and cultural information that help bring about, well, we might say, ho'ululahui, the growth of a nation on the sea, the growth of a people on an island. And that's so important. If you show up on an island with a couple boats full of people, you want your people, ilamau, to live long. And that became an integrated part in the stories, to pass on the traditions, the morals, the cultural values. And that's why today, like what you're doing with this project, it becomes even more important when we realize that what needs to be done is to keep those values integrated into surfing, especially in our world today. Surf forecaster Pat Caldwell, you know, something so simple, give a wave, take a wave, you know, and the world would be a lot better place. I'm always like, oh gosh, look at what's happening in places where people don't surf. And yet, you know, there's over 20 million surfers in the world today. They're all out at Waimea with me. So, you know, how we got, So, you know, but as again, let's go back to the Keaulana family. You know, humility is a sign of competence. That's what they have to say. And that's a Hawaiian cultural value. So, you know, hopefully if we really recognize the position of surfing in this culture, in many cultures across the Pacific and beyond, we can see how important it is to keep those values connected to surfing today. What was the question?
That was perfect. Let's take an intermission.
Okay.
I'm gonna switch cards, drink some water.
Yeah.
And we'll start talking about your massive collection of.
Okay. Sorry about that. So, did I leave any circles open? Let's see. I don't think I did.
No,
I think I closed each one. Ben Finney, and we're talking about that. Don't get involved, but there was another thing with Ben Finney. Oh yeah, that's what it was. Are you still rolling? Or did you stop already? You're still rolling?
Still rolling, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you can cut that little zing-zang out, but you know, that thing with Ben, when I met him and first asked him, that's where we started on this big circle. And he said, don't get involved with this and that. That was all later when he became, I asked him this, years later, I asked him to sit on my thesis committee, and he did right up until he had a stroke, and that was 6 months before I graduated. That actually became an opportunity. I'd been to Aotearoa, New Zealand with Windward Community College and with a bunch of kupuna and elders and students and teachers, and one of them was Rubalite Kavena Johnson, and she's a national treasure, still alive today, studied the Kumalipo. She's phenomenal. And Ben and Ruby were really good friends, but I didn't know that at the time. When we were down in Taupo, and you know, Ben's wife had called me and said, you know, he's got to bow out. But he had already spent 4 hours with me going over my thesis, more than that, but one session was 4 hours, page by page. And I wish I could repeat that. Just like I wish I could repeat all the things that Kumu Kavena kind of said in my thesis dissertation at that moment when I was arguing the defense. But that first day I met Ben, the Ruby stories will come later. And he said, I was able to show that they were surfing lala diagonally across the face of the wave through the research. Now your job is to go out and build a surfboard, a papahe'e nalu, and do that. That was a direct, like, you gotta go do this because you're young, you have the materials available. And he said, plus, there is now like thousands more pages translated into English. And you might even learn Hawaiian to be able to study more in depth all of the information and knowledge that can be passed on. I took that really seriously. I was honored. I was like, you know, we're not worthy, you know, the whole thing. It was the beginning of a beautiful, long relationship. Bless his soul. Hokulea was coming up, had already left Tahiti and was coming home 3 weeks before Hokulea got here. Ben Finney passed away. And, you know, I know he was watching them sail in. 3 years after Hokulea had left, they'd gone around the world. You can imagine that was a life fulfilled for Professor Ben Finney. With all the strife and struggles and, you know, internal things that happen and ethnic conflicts and every other thing, science versus culture and all that stuff, it took all of them and everything. And the skill and ability of all those people from across the Pacific, Papamau, to do that, to bring that canoe home. And Ka'au McKinney was my teacher right there before I even started these surf classes. And he was the alakai. He was the first one in line to become the navigator. you know, unfortunately, he's passed away before the voyage actually happened. That's the kind of stress that came along with trying to fight against an entire discipline, an entire academic world who wanted to say, no, no, we get to tell you. But the Pacific Islanders, the Hawaiians, it's like, we did it, and we're going to show you. And that's why Kumukavena always said, where you hear that? You show me, boy. Or she'd hand me a scribbled piece of paper, you know, kanalu, Malcolm-chan. You go look, boy. And that's why the value is ka'imi ike, go seek knowledge. And makahanaka ike, in the doing, you will see what's for real. You will find that knowledge. So, you know, I did. I sought out the knowledge that he inspired me to go do. I sought out the wood. And from there, it took me on this journey that's led us to this interview today. So we'll talk about that next. Yeah, so Ben Finney inspired me to go out and make a surfboard. And I was at Windward Community College, and I was in the woodworking class and talked to the carver, Shane Eagleton, over there at the time. You know, Brother Jordan has been running it, and he was just a student at that time, actually. Anyway, they were going to build a canoe out of a Norfolk pine that had been dropped on Hickam Air Force Base. And so I told him I was looking for a plank to make a surfboard. And he said, well, Norfolk pine, we cut the top off. You want this piece over here? And it was a 14-foot long piece of pine that weighed 200 pounds. And I was like, sure. And set it up. Wanted to do it traditionally, but had no idea how to make a ko'i and adze or any of the techniques to using that. UH Manoa had all kinds of stuff on that and on stoneworking and all these things. But I had one semester to pull it off. So they gave me a space in the back, and I did a bunch of research. Ben Finney, in the back of his book, had some information about the protocols surrounding surfboard building. And I looked at that, and the first thing it said is, you're going to take something from the mountains and take it to the sea. You better give something back. And the traditional red fish, the kumu fish, and kumus, like you know it to be a teacher, and the source, there's that relationship. And there's always that balance between the duality, the light and the dark, the day and the night, and male, female, all aspects of things. And same thing in Malka Makai. And so what happens, Malka comes Makai, and in this way, it's honoring Malka to do that. I was working lifeguarding out at Kaneohe Marine Base. I told my trainer, my lead lifeguard, Jeff Barbiero, you know, and he was a Lavaia, he was a fisherman. Bless his soul, he's passed away now too. But I told him, you know, I gotta catch a kumu fish. I'm no like diving fisherman kind of guy. He said, okay, we're gonna go. He drops me off at some random reef from the jet ski in the middle of Kaneohe Bay. Said, I'll be back. And he just left me there. I started swimming around this reef, and sure enough, I seen one kumu. But I never take the first fish, so I kept swimming around. Sure enough, I seen one more kumu. And I shot the thing and into the reef, and tried to carefully pull the spear out, but of course the fish got stuck and disappeared. I was like, oh. So he comes back 20 minutes later. I'm floating around Kaneohe Bay, and he goes, what? You shot one? He said, hang on. And he drives in a little circle. He goes, here it is, right there. Found it. So and he come Air Force Base, whatever. They harvested this tree, and so I found a tree next to Windward, and I did the protocols as best as I could. You know, I'm putting in the mix, but it's the intention there, that conscious action. And that's really what's behind any prayer and any action. To honor the ancestors, my kahu'ukui akahalavai from the zenith to the horizon, and every cardinal direction. Did my best. I offered the kumu and set up my rack next to that and hand carved the board with a big number 6 planer and hitting every one of those knots. Now, why Norfolk pine? Well, at the time I was like, well, that's sugar pine. And when Duke Kahanamoku got to Australia in 1915, he shaped a board out of local sugar pine. Oh, there's my, and the thing is this, where you can find a koa tree in the forest like that, that's 16 to 18 foot long. I really wanted to make an Ulu surfboard, ovoid in shape, 12 to 16 feet long, 6 to 8 inches round in thickness. But I'm not gonna go cut down a koa tree because we need to keep every koa tree in the forest that's over there, and we need to keep planting more. The native woods are sacred and important, and they're being choked out by invasives. So, no. Since then, I've learned, yeah, they're being choked out by invasives. In fact, it's those invasives that we need to cut down from the forest. And there's no reason we shouldn't give life to those trees that have life. They came here by others' introduction, but they're still alive. But boy, do we need to get them out. So early on, right away, I realized that it wasn't necessarily going to be native wood, but we could follow the traditions and make wood boards because we're in love with plastics as surfers. We need to move away from that. We need to find more sustainable surfboard materials, ways, you know, and strength versus weight. We can't compete with epoxy and styrofoam and all this stuff. But when you carve your own surfboard, take that out, pray for safe passage and safe return, and ride that board. Boy, that's something different. One thing, first thing is humility. It's not easy. You may have seen me paddle out with this board that I have right below me at Uncle Clyde's funeral the other day. And I forgot how thin this board was. It was only like a 2.5 inch thick blank when I made it. And I think this one was the African tulip. And so I was experimenting, and we learn about wood through using it. You know, but going back to that, I carved that board out of Norfolk pine, and I researched in the La'au Hawaiian, Isabella Abbott's books about 12 different pa'ele Hawaiian paints or stains or coverings that made the wood water resistant. And that was the beginning of my journey. That board's over there in the rack in the stack that we pulled these boards out of, but down below it'd be hard to get. Yeah. And another guy nearby cut down a mango tree on his property. I was fortunate to get that 14.5 foot long mango board. That board is 8 inches thick, where this one here is about 6 inches thick. So this one is actually called a kiko'o. And kiko'o is a measurement. Yeah, it wasn't that board. We're going with this board. Between your thumb and forefinger. 2.5 to 4 inches thick, you know. So here's this board. Turns out the thicker, the wider, the thicker the board is, it might be really heavy, but it's buoyant. And buoyancy matters. So my mango board takes 4 Hawaiians and 1 Portuguese to carry up the beach at Waimea after the 4th of July Kuhio Nalu race. And you paddle it like that. Whoosh, half second later, you lunge forward. But you get that thing going, and boy, woe is the canoe or the surfer kid that gets in my way, because, you know, it's going to sink it. And yet I've seen it jump this high out of the water at Kahana after purling on a steep wave on the outside wave, the ahiu wave over there, you know. We learn through experiencing. So, you know, the Hawaiian surfboard carving is a journey unto itself in learning about yourself, your skill and ability, the risk associated with surfing a wood surfboard. But we need to continue that practice. You know, this board, you asked me about it first. This is monkey pod. So monkey pod is an acacia. Koa is an acacia. Acacia, super hard, nice and resinous, oh, very heavy. This was actually a piece of a rubbish cut with all kinds of pukas in it. Then my friend Mana'ai, Daniel Anthony, who's all about getting rid of the coconut rhinoceros beetle and all that. I seen these blanks and I was like, so what, Daniel, what are you doing those boards? I never even soaked them. You can have them, bro. There's all kind of pukas all inside. Pukas. So it was a square blank and I cut the shape of an Alaia surfboard. An Alaia surfboard is described by John Papa'i'i in the research as 9 feet or less, 9 feet or less, and wide in the nose and tapering towards the tail. It is a board that is basically thin and vibrates, flexes as you're riding on the wave, and it can cut across a wave. And because of that, you can cut into the wave to get out of the wave, or ride up on top and over the back as it closes out, you know. Unlike an Olo surfboard, and if you follow me down here, this Olo surfboard, I'll talk more about that, has a rounded bottom. So it wants to ride the open swell, and it's made for the opu'u, the big open swell that rushes seaward or rushes forward towards the shoreline. But if the wave lifts up high, the Olo board will slide out because of its rounded bottom. We know this, surfboard shapers understand that. It will slide out, or it will plunge down into the world, or into the water, and plunge down shoreward and jump up out of the water. And so, yeah, that's right, you slide out on these Olo boards. So that's why the Olo were meant for the big open ocean swells. So he said the Olo surfboards were made of wili wili. Wili wili, Erythrina sanosensis is the native tree that we have here. Wili wili, literally twisting and turning. Really hard to find a long, tall, straight wili wili tree. So fortunate to have found a couple in Hakipu'u. See, the thing about the wili wili tree was there was an invasive bug that came to Hawaii called the Gal-wasp, African Gal-wasp, I think. And it got here. And Erythrina exists in a lot of different places. If you go to Waimea Bay, you go to the valley, you'll see Erythrina, various subspecies of Erythrina family that they've planted there in their botanical garden. Well, those Gal-wasps came here and it started to eat and destroy and kill all the wili wili. We thought we were gonna see the extinction of this native tree. So just happened to be this moment when I was getting into surfboard building. All over the place were these dead wili wili trees standing. And once they die, the boring wood beetles will make all kind of pukas in it and stuff like that. The carpenter bees loved them. And they were already considered rubbish wood because the wood was soft and light and it just deteriorated very easily. Like balsa, balsa is straight, but same thing, it likes to drink water. But again, Tom Blake, famous surfer from the early days who came from Wisconsin. Wisconsin, met Duke as he passed through on his way back from England surfing and going to the Olympics in 1912 in Sweden. I guess he did a silent film presentation there in Wisconsin. Tom Blake was enamored with him. He was the usher. Got so stoked that he moved to California, learned to surf, got on the mats in the Lurleen, came to Hawaii and said, hey, Duke, you remember me? You know, like Kung Fu Panda style. And let's hang out. So they did. And at that point, Duke and Tom pulled out these boards from the Bishop Museum. Now, Bernice Paoa Bishop, right? She was fortunate when she started the museum because her dad, Chief Abner Paki, sheriff in Honolulu in the 1840s, had these giant Olo surfboards that Tom Blake says he would surf them after the Makahiki ended, which was when Kamehameha passed away in 1819. It left, whenever a chief passes away, they would set down the kapu and have a period, ua noa. They would set down the taboo, the rules and regulations that Kamehameha swore by because it was his aumakua, his ancestral deity, Kuka Ilimoku, who had won the islands, and his ancestors that he prayed and loved and honored. He was never going to set down that kapu. 70 years, all kind people from all over the world, colonizers, had to live under the Kapu system. We need to remember that. But it was a time of change. Everyone knew it. When a kapu is set down, it's the duty of the new chief to come in and set up the kapu and reclaim that. But Liholiho, Kamehameha II, was encouraged by the Queen Regent, Ka'ahumanu, Kamehameha's favorite wife, who he loved to surf with, to eat together. And the Aikapu was the most strict and important kapu in all the system. So that was public acknowledgement. Once he finally, after several days trying to avoid it, hanging out with the Catholics offshore of Big Island, you know, he chose to sit down and eat. So men and women were not allowed to eat together from the time of Papa and Wakea, Earth Mother and Sky Father. And rather than getting into that story, it's important to recognize just how sacred and important that kapu was. And there's plenty of stories about it. It wasn't that the kapu was abolished. It was never taken up again after Kamehameha passed away. And plenty of people say this, that, or the other. But if you really look at Liholiho's actions in sitting down with his birth mother, his queen mother, his beloved sister, and Heva Heva, Kahuna Nui, for Kamehameha, you have to recognize that that was an act of aloha, an act of love, because there was two choices. One, sit down and eat with them, or two, go to battle and sacrifice them all at the heiau because the kapu was broken. He chose love. 80 years later, we saw Liliuokalani choose love, aloha. No, to avoid, collision of armed forces and perhaps loss of life, I do this, set down my authority until such time as the United States recognizes us. That happened tomorrow, July 4th, 1890, when they marched on it. We have the January 17th day when all it really happened. But all my history is getting confused here. But that's okay. But the point behind it is that Liholiho left that kapu down. Okay. So with the end of the ritual athletic festival of the Makahiki Festival, which is the harvest festival that happens in the fall, honoring the time of Lono, when the kapu was set down annually and people could all surf together. And the gods were set aside. The ancestors, there was this new 1820, less than a year later, here comes Christianity in its missionary form, in its Puritan form, where there was a strong need to to move forward into this new era. Ritual and daily life, as Ben Finney said, was set aside. People no longer, I'm sure it still happened, but people were encouraged and kind of enforced to set down these deities in light of the one God, the Christian God. And so with that, all things Hawaiian began to wane. Hey, where they were growing kalo and going out to catch fish, I guarantee you nalu is still happening. And that's Patrick Mosier is the one who really likes that. He's this guy from his University of Missouri who does his works on surfing. Pacific Passages is his book, and he says, no, surfing didn't almost die out. Oh, all these people would love to say that, all these colonizers, because then they say they rescued surfing and then California took it from there. I'm sorry, I love you guys. I lived in San Mateo in the 70s. But in reality, that was a tradition that was integrated and embedded into daily Hawaiian life. I'm sure it's still happening in those places. But here we have Chief Abner Paki, the father of Bernice Pauahi, who was, as the sheriff of Honolulu, surfing in the 1830s and 1840s on these huge 150 plus pound koa olo surfboards. You know what his brother's name is? Kanaka He'enalu, surfing man. Those boards, Tom Blake says he must have pulled them out from under a shack, cleaned them up, glued on the tail patch, you know, with the old nasty horse hoof glue or whatever, and surfed them. But no, I would rather say that those were heirlooms, passed down for generations through a family associated with surfing. Paki was of the highest bloodlines. And that is significant. So, fast forward, we have Duke Paoa Kahanamoku, and Tom Blake finds those boards, cleans them up, and goes to templates them, surfs them, makes their own, and rides them. It was his paipo board that he made for a project with Hui Malamo Kekai. It was a family strengthening project, and again, missing, he never got to make the kukuina oil before he passed away. But I watched my boy Finn, as you know, as a 8 or 9 year old, surf this at Kahana for fun, because he wanted to surf Bam's board, or Grandpa's board, you know. And this is the paipo style that they were riding in at Makapu'u and such when he was growing up. Yeah, he grew up in over there in what is that called? Hermosa Beach, Redondo area. But that's what he remembers from body surfing and bodyboarding and mat riding. You know what I mean? So that was the shape that he came up with. So, you know, I wanna encourage everybody to go through a process like this as a surfer, to recognize surfing as a traditional Hawaiian cultural activity, to whether they surf the board or not. You know, if you shape a modern board and surf it, that's a different thing altogether. You're so much closer to that experience. And it's truly about your relationship with the ocean. And this is heritage, this is your relationship with the culture of the ocean, because surfing is Hawaiian. And Hawaii is just a cradle of surfing. It was all the way across Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. And it was an important part of native life as a daily activity, a ritual activity, and a poetic metaphor full of knowledge and information. So we have to start by asking ourselves, what is it that the ancestors wanted to tell us? Because they wrote it on the landscape. They wrote it in, they spoke it in the stories. It's for us to sit there groping in the dark, kanoho ana hopu, for those answers. But they gave us places like the heiau that gathers the ao, the flow of space and time, the current that is our universe. The heiau, for us to acquire the mana that our ancestors wanted to share with us. And that is Hawaiian surfing. We surf through life, and they knew that. Yeah, you know, I mean, I was saying I wish I surfed this board over at the Uncle Buff's contest this last year because it was so tiny. I surfed this board, which I really wanted to. This one is African Tulip. I did wax it. I don't normally wax my boards, but I waxed it because I had done that for a while. This board was an experiment. The first African Tulip board that I made. It comes out beautiful. What is all this streaking? That's actually some red dirt streaking because I got asked by NCIS. They wanted to have some boards in the background of one of their Hollywood shots of a hotel background, and Hawaii hotel, and they wanted to have a bunch of papahe and nalu in there. So I had to scramble, make a bunch of boards, and so I made this one. But I had made 3 of these monkey pod boards, and so they wanted them to look all the same. So I tried a red streaking to camouflage the African Tulip. But this is the board that I rode. I really actually like this board, and it works well on a little bit bigger wave. And you know, you don't need to wax it. That's one of the great questions everybody always asks me. Ooh, did Hawaiians wax their board? Well, again, if we go back to this wili wili and you see the crusty nature of the shellac that forms from the kukui, the roasted kukui mash, that's their wax, you know? It really works. But when you take a buffer and polish the kukui and make it all nice, well, this was buffed too. I was so stoked, the red dirt streaks, you know, the brownish. I had to kind of make a mix to make it that color to try and get it like the board. So, you know, Hollywood, yeah, that's what we do. But yeah, it helped me because that gave me the resources to get a couple more blanks and carve a couple more boards. I did want to show you this board right here real quick because this board, this is a classic because it's made of ulu, breadfruit. There, take a look. If you pan over here, you look, there is ulu tree, a breadfruit tree. Look at how big that tree is. That tree is less than 20 years old. But Aina Momona, this is a very rich, fertile place here in Hakipu'u. And so that is a Samoan ulu tree. We haven't, oh yeah, there's the Hawaiian ulu tree there that's, you can see in the background, growing over 50 feet tall. But the ulu is a lighter wood. It's also light in color, but not when you bury it in the fish pond. So again, my friend Daniel Anthony had me do a carving seminar up at Papahana in Heiaia, and so I carved this board in a day with them over there. I'm trying to find somewhere in here is like a pearl shell. Wow, that's so funny. Where did it go? It's a piece of the worm was in here. It got forgotten. It got left in Heiaia fish pond, and it got left for so long that the worms actually went into it. You can see a lot. Oh, there it is. There's a little mother of pearl from the calcareous worm that was in there before, you know. Yeah. But ulu is a hard wood, much harder wood that you can make an alaia out of versus that wili wili, which flexes like this. And so this was one of my favorite boards to ride. And years ago when I was teaching at HPU, we had the Saturday Island Surfing Sites class, and I took them to Makaha for the buffalo. I didn't have any money, and one of my students, she gave me $20 to enter the contest, and I surfed it. And what do you know? Lo and behold, I placed and was invited to go to the finals. But I had to get my students back by 4 o'clock, so I could, you know, I had to do my protocols, and I got them back to class, got them back to HPU over here on the Windward side, and later on I got a call from my friend Kahi Picaro. Hey Ian, thanks for bailing on the final, I won! And so that's the story of my Ulu board. But yeah, breadfruit is one of the traditional woods along with wili wili, and traditionally they would make well, this was sort of, I learned later, kiko'o style in its thickness, but they really made olo surfboards out of it, which were 6 to 8 inches thick and 12 to 16 foot plus. And this one's 13 and a half feet, almost 14 feet. and then koa. And I have heard of banana stumps being used to ride at Uo in Lahaina, of all places. Bless our friends in Lahaina, and I hope the recovery goes well. And John Papa Ii observed that happening over there. And the funny story that I'll end with is George Downing. You know, you saw me with this African tulip board at Uncle Clyde Aikau's funeral. And so I'm gonna keep talking while you show that. Uncle Clyde Aikau's funeral, and that's how you hit him up, my daughter, Madeira. Found you, Uncle Clyde. Love you, Uncle Clyde. But I paddled this board out to honor him because that was part of the most Hawaiian moment I'd ever seen in a surfing contest, when he asked me to be his board caddy, and he walked out for his final eddy in 2016 at 66 years old. And we came around the corner, the whole crowd busted out in cheers. And the old lore talks about how the chanters would chant the surfers down to the ocean and give their name chants. And Naihe's name chant was the one Kalakaua adopted for himself as his surfing chant. And here was this moment, and I actually spontaneously busted out and chant before I knew it. Kulana nalu kapu'o hule hule kie kie kane hoalani e, calling to Io, the highest bird, that God on high, the one. And eku emanue, soar. And that is a traditional chant. And that's the one I gave for Uncle Clyde in 2016. So almost a decade later, here we are at his services, and I shared that in the circle for him. But that's why I brought the board, because here in the middle of all this commercial surfing world is this very Hawaiian tradition, and that the beloved Aikau family, you know, Uncle Clyde told me, I know why our family cares for Waimea Bay, because again, to speak of Kahuna Heva Heva, Kamehameha, you know, big Kahuna Nui, who lived in Waimea and is buried there, rests there today. You know, and he presided over the heiau there at Pu'umahuka and Haleoiwi in the other heiau inside Waimea, and also presided here over Puakea heiau at the top of Kanahuanahopu, our land division here in Hakipu'u. So there's these connections, that legacy. And I saw that come forward and happen. And so to me, I'm super humbled and super honored and super proud to represent Uncle Clyde and Uncle Eddie and the Aikau family, the Ohana, who is gifting this to the millions of people on YouTube and across the world who come to celebrate Waimea, this most Hawaiian of places where we surf. The Opu'u, Kanalu Ha'i'opu'u, the giant open ocean waves here on Oahu. So yeah, thanks Raymond for coming down. I'm happy to share all this stuff about surfboards, and humbled to be a part of it all. Just a cog in the wheel, but super stoked.
Hey guys, Ramon here. Thank you all for tuning in to today's video. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell to stay up to date with what's happening here on Oahu. If you would like to watch more videos, check out our playlist. And last but not least, consider becoming a member of the Oahu Surf Films Ohana.